The Option O P100 is arguably the most talked about expensive grinder on the market, coming in at $2,650 US for a 98mm variable RPM grinder. It's a mouthful. This is by far what I see to be the most beloved on all these forums. It is the cheapest entry point into this area while still having something that really delivers and just does what it needs to do. But what are my thoughts on it? Well, I guess we're gonna find out. So I bought this grinder about 3 or 4 months ago, actually from one of my Patreon members who had it and decided he wanted to go back to a Weber EG1. Loads of people will sell their left kidney in order to get one, and so I was like, well, I guess I'll do the same. So I bought this a few months ago, and I've been using it so much since then because, well, there's been just loads and loads and loads and loads of you that have been wanting my thoughts on this. It's kind of a chunky boy. You know, honestly, it's like my counterpart, except maybe I'm a little taller. I prefer the P64 at an angle, and one of those reasons is because the dial here being flat is it's actually really annoying to see where the numbers are as you're turning the dial. This right here is the dial, and as you turn it, if you're standing in front of it, you can't see where the marker is. So if you see right here is the marker. And so since it's flat, it's sitting right here, and you're around back, you can't see Jack Diddley squat. And I like seeing Jack Diddley squat. Jack is a friend of mine, and I like to see him on occasion. Now, there is a little trick some people have used where they put a sticker 180 degrees around so you can have an idea there, but that just annoys me. I don't want to have to use 2 stickers, because then I'm like, well, which one's the original sticker? Where am I really at? And then you have a correlating number system just below. My number system moves like a spinning record. So that can get annoying, and I know, I've read on forums that, because this is a common thing, some are tighter than others, but a lot of people just say they tape it down. I don't want to put tape on an already questionably looking grinder. On the back, a little bit of tape. I understand you may not see it, but I don't know. I don't want the goop on it if I ever take it off, or I don't want to put tape on this grinder. It's almost $3,000 once you include shipping and maybe import tax. People are like, well, you don't touch it. Why would you touch it? There are definitely times I have touched it, and I don't mean to. Or for instance, whenever I'm knocking this out, which I'll show you in a second, my thumb touches it. And even if it moves a little bit, that kind of throws you off with where you're at. And then you have to go back to try to find the 0 that you did earlier, because it is easy to make the burrs touch, and then you can set 0, but the strength at which you touch them is going to vary every time.
That's pretty annoying, to be honest with you.
Now inside, of course, we have 98mm burrs, which are the big boys. These are EK43 burrs, but you get the idea. That's 98. Here's 80, here's 64, here's 60. So as you can see, there's just a ton more surface area on the 98mm, which many of you are absolutely convinced bigger equals better, but there's absolutely no objective proof behind that. There are a lot of times when you're using these high-end grinders with the 98 mils, they're gonna taste better, but I think a lot of that is because they're asking for a higher price, which gives them more room to work with whenever they're building it. They can do tighter tolerances, they can do better alignments, and maybe a sturdier motor where there's less oscillation in the RPM, so you're gonna get better coffee. At this point, there is absolutely no proof other than anecdotal evidence from people sharing their experiences online that bigger is better. So if you're watching this and you have like a P64 or something with smaller burrs,
oh, I really need to upgrade to the 98 because bigger is better,
I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. That all being said, they are massive, but there are bigger. There's 120mm that are out there, the Molar Z, for instance, and you have like one of the Diddings has 120mm burrs that you can get for cheaper than this. You have these big old 98mm burrs, which also means the bigger surface area. Yes, that means that the people designing the burrs have more room to really kind of get what they're hypothetically wanting. Just so you know, when we're creating burrs, we don't really know what's going on. I've created a few burrs by this time, and it's not that easy. And there's no real objectivity behind it. It's kind of guessing, well, I think if we make a cut here at this angle, it might do this. But once you include RPM and it being under load, again, you don't really know. It's all guesswork. That being said, these definitely heat up a lot less and they grind a lot faster because of how much surface area. Now, of course, at the top, we have where you dose the coffee beans in. And right inside, you have a little anti-popcorn device, just a little slanted piece of metal, so that as the coffee is going into these horizontally set burrs, it doesn't pop up and out. So you have two twisty areas. So the top part's the twisty area for dialing, and then this second part is the twisty area to take off the top burr set. So all you're gonna do is untwist, there it goes. So we pull that off. So that's all this top is. So as you're twisting and setting this, there is some nice grease here, so remember, have food-safe grease, and you can re-grease it later if it stops being so smooth. But as this goes, it pushes down the top burr carrier. When you twist backwards to go coarser, it alleviates the pressure on the springs of the top burr carrier. Now, as we're inside, here we are. We have the bearing right here, which just wee, little bearing boy. Ba-dum-bum-bum-bum. And then in order to take the top burr off, we just pull out the top burr carrier. It's a very low retention grinder. It does a great job with that. And a lot of it's because of the high RPM that it'll spit it out at if you have that mode on. As you see, there's just a little bit of coffee kind of collected around the edge right there. And then, you know, of course, from the popcorning, that's on the inside collar of where you feed your coffee in. This is so tightly in there, I can't just take the burr out. I have to get a hairdryer. I don't have a heat gun. I don't feel like investing in one. I set this up against a wall and I just set the hairdryer on it for 5 minutes or so. And the aluminum expands 3 times as fast as the steel does, and so it expands and pops the burr out in order for me to change burrs. It's not as easy as 1, 2, 3, pull out, put in. And it's because the obsession with tolerances is real. Now, as I went over in my EG1 video, there are ways you can approach building the grinder to achieve really great alignment without hyper obsessing on tolerances. And that was not really their approach here. Their approach here was to have incredibly small tolerances. They list the tolerances on their website, but they are impressively small, and they reject things that don't measure up to it after the processing, the CNCing of it all. But in general, that's not necessarily the best way to achieve most precise alignment. And they say there's no need to align out of box, but there are plenty of users I know that do have to indeed align them based off the marker test, which I have my own qualms with the marker test because we don't really know what's going on under load. But in the end, my whole point with this is, if you're wanting something to swap out burrs often, you might have a unit where the tolerances are so tight and SSP tolerances might vary that you could get them stuck often. I've read a lot of people who do get them stuck. Others just don't ever change their burrs, and then that's fine. You don't have to worry about it. But that is an issue that I have had, and it's not cool. I don't like that. I don't want stuck burrs, and I don't want to have to go get a hairdryer. So as you see, there's not much retention inside. You just have some kind of up here along these walls, and then you have some kind of in the finishing teeth. Now, I've been brewing filter most recently, so with espresso, there's more that will get caught in the finishing teeth. But for the most part, it's very low retention and very minimal exchange between changing out coffees. This has been my Old Faithful, and it does fit just fine. On top of here, you just do a little puff puff, and you get just enough out to make it even cleaner. So I know with the ULF burrs that go in here, that there's a lot more grounds get caught in those finishing teeth, especially if you're doing turbo-style shots, which can get very annoying. So you can get just clumps of it in those teeth as it's trying to come out. What I have noticed is the same burr set in here versus the burr set, that same burr set in my EK43 with the tightest plate, and I have aligned it using alignment tools. The coffee tastes better regardless of RPM on here out of the EK43. It is consistently a better tasting cup. The workflow sucks, obviously. It's a lot messier, and it's not as fun to use because of the mess, but 10 times out of 10, it's tasting better. A burr set that I did not like in the P100 was the ULF, the ultra low fines burrs, which are my favorite burrs on the 80mm Weber Workshops EG1. But the 98mm version, I did not like for espresso or for filter in the P100. They tasted a whole lot better out of the EK43. And I'll show you this here in a little bit, but when you run lower RPM, there's a lot that gets caught inside that you need to run at full speed in order to shoot it out. I'm speculating that maybe there are grounds being reground before it's actually coming out, so it's really skewing the particle distribution inherent with that burr set. I'm just not a big fan of vertical burrs because it has to have a specific build in order to really help push out those grounds into the final cup. And so with this, there tends to be almost half the dose left up top when you're doing finely ground coffee that needs to be ejected through a higher RPM and then by using the knocker system, which we'll go over here in a bit as well. My speculation is due to the horizontally set burrs and the feeding of the beans straight into the burrs, your alignment relying solely on those burrs to matriculate the beans into the teeth themselves, so you don't have any feeding system like on the EK43 that's auger fed. You don't have a pre-breaker like on the Zerno or on the Bentwood, which can pre-break the beans, which allow you to use a smaller burr set to give you more surface area when you think about it, because you're not relying on the pre-breakers on the burr itself in order to manipulate the speed of the beans entering into the final exit. I find similar quality cups between this and my Zerno, which has the pre-breaker, slower fed system, and so it's allowing me to make that 64 millimeter multi-purpose burr more like an 80 millimeter, because I'm grinding shards of coffee as opposed to relying on a 64 millimeter burr grinding full coffee beans. The speed of the feed rate is 100% dictated by how you're pouring in the beans. With other vertically mounted ones, there are augers that are feeding in at a consistent rate, which is giving you different fracture points. There are 3 little pegs here that have pretty tight spring sets on it, and so when you push down on that top is when you're setting the gap. Then you just screw this top on until it's nice and snug. Then we can just go find our 0 point again. It's right there. I can just reset my little dial and we're back to good to go. So next we get to the knocker. Now on here you see this pretty ugly protrusive knocker, this little button that looks like a belly button or a nose or something. I don't know what it is, but it's pretty ugly. It's pretty grotesque, but in my opinion, it's much better than the preceding knocker, which may have been a little bit more sleek because it was sans button, which is this right here. But the issue with this is, in order to get that final knockout, which is necessary with this grinder, grounds do get caught in here every single time. It's necessary to have this. What it does is, as you push the button in, it pushes another piece of metal down, and then when the button's fully clicked in, it shoots up, vibrates, and drops. What they used to have was this system where this was screwed into the side of the thing, and you had to push down the top. This is much more fun for me. But the issue is, a lot of times I hold it like this when I'm clicking it, and I will move my little record scratcher up here. Next, as we move down, we have what I absolutely loathe. You thought I was gonna say love. Loathe. Which is this. This is their new kind of magic tumbler or whatever you call it. I absolutely despise this thing. Not only that, but I despise how it sits on the forks. Now you may notice these are not the original forks. This was the original fork system, and when you set a portafilter on it, because they're just flat and they're not that deep, you were playing a tricky game of this falling out as it vibrated. Whee! Which is not a fun game to play, especially once you have coffee in it, it gets everywhere. It's like, do you want to take the risk? Probably not. Thanks to my friend Mick down in Australia, who is an awesome tattoo artist and has 1,000 grinders. He actually had this CNC milled and sent me an extra one. This one has little grooves coming up at the end, so you put your portafilter in, and that junk ain't coming out. Not coming out. Mick, hopefully you make commission on this, because that's a great idea. My issue with this, first of all, it barely sits on here, and I've dinged up my counter so many times from moving this. It pops right out. Move this at all, it starts to slide off. So I have knocked this off by moving this, by putting it again, maybe not the best way, by trying to grab it and fumbling it, because this only goes halfway. It's very frustrating. You know, they could have gone maybe a little further, or had maybe little grips for this. Maybe it could have had little rubber on the bottom or something in order to make the friction stick a little bit better. So it doesn't sit on there well, and I drop it. I mean, it's probably been 100 times. I'm obsessed with magnets, and I praise them all the time when they're used on grinders. But here, I don't like it. And it's simple. It's because when I'm putting my coffee in my portafilter and I'm holding my portafilter like this, you can't pull this off. So then you're like trying this whole little game where you're trying to pull while doing this, but then sometimes it can it gets really messy. There have been times where like the magnet's not strong enough on the basket to not pull up the whole thing on occasion. Whoops. So I don't like it. You got to kind of like make sure you're holding it down, pull it up. It's not a good vibe. And now I have this stuck on here. Nice. That wasn't from the magnets because it like clicked into the edges. Okay, that's a little blank for clean your machines. They also have magnets on the bottom, but they're not that strong, and it's not strong enough to stop the top from dislodging it, and then as it's open, ground's going everywhere. I much prefer the Weber doser because this one has no magnets on the top, and on the inside, it's very simple to do this. This one, you have to like hold the whole ring And when you do this, it's like, it just doesn't work the same way. I'm just not as big of a fan. And I like there being a lid on this because I like to shake. That's one of the things I enjoy doing is homogenizing grounds if I'm going from this to a portafilter. This, it just misses the mark. Now, of course, they come with a funnel. So you can always use the funnel, put it on in there, and then it's nice. It matches everything, good to go. Fast workflow, easy. This does the job. It's not a big deal. Now, this machine also comes with a WDT tool, but it's honestly like the most worthless one I've ever seen. It matches the machine, but the needles are like thicker than my pinky, which has been broken twice, and it's not gonna really do much. And they don't separate. Like you can sit here and try to bend them all day. Maybe you could take an Allen wrench, loosen it, and change it up. But unless you're switching out the needles to something thinner, these are just so thick, you're better off like using this as like a comb or something. Maybe I don't know, something like that. You see that? I barely touched it, and that thing flew off like it was coming out of a cannon. I do actually like this. I complained recently about the Olympia Mocha SD and how the bottom tray just kind of like sits there and doesn't really connect to anything. I like this. There are two little holes. You just push it straight in. And it's easy to take off to clean. Just pop it on out. You clean it up. You just put it back in. Just wiggle, 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 yeah. Wiggle, 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 yeah. And it's on there. You see, you have to do the song though. It will not work. Quote me on that. All right, so as we turn it around, we see there are two buttons here. Now this button, what it will do is it will go at whatever RPM you set it at, which we'll look at that in a second. And then at the end, it will ramp up to the highest RPM around 1700. Though some people have measured it around 1500, some around 1600. The top end is, it's somewhere around there. But when you hit this, it's on whatever RPM. I'm gonna go lower so you can hear the difference majorly. We're at around 500 RPM, and then does that to shoot out whatever grounds are left, and then it turns off automatically. So that's a nice one. This one is just a manual, so you click it, and it will run at the RPM that you set in perpetuity. So I can go all the way up to 1700, all the way down to 200, and it'll just go. Then you just have to turn it off manually. So you have a timed one and manual. No, you cannot set the timer on this, so just do it. I do have to use RDT with this. When I don't, it becomes a chaffy mess. I know a lot of you do not, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not negating your experience, but in my experience, I need to use RDT with this for the cleanest grind output. Otherwise, it does get a little messy. We have the two buttons there, and on this side, we have the RPM. And from a design perspective, they put, just 1 all the way up to 9. Those numbers are from like 200 to 1700, so you do your maths, and then you kind of understand where you're at as far as the numbers go. But you can also just talk in terms of numbers to other P100 users, because that's mostly who you're going to be communicating RPM to. My thoughts on RPM are not solidified. I've not seen the objective proof on one thing or the other. A lot of people have conflated the results of cone burrs and have applied it to flat burrs as if they're the same thing and as if the physics are the same. They're not the same. I'm not saying that the results may not be similar, but all in all, I have found if you dial in a shot at 200 RPM, you dial in a shot at 1500 RPM, they're going to be different grind sizes because you're moving the peak. But for most burr sets, I've noticed that the taste is pretty much the same, and the extraction yield is pretty much the same. When you dial them into the same recipe, they will be different grind sizes. But anyway, we won't really get into that because it's so much speculation. It's an overbuilt motor. You'll never need all of the power that it can give you. It's never going to stall on anything, even at 200 RPM. It's going to chew right through, and it's going to do it quickly and easily. It will be a little loud, but it's not terrible. So let's go ahead. We'll start grinding some coffee, and you can kind of see how this thing works. So what I want you to notice on this is I'm at an espresso setting around traditional. These are the high uniformity burrs. This would give me about a 1 to 2 shot in like 30 seconds, this grind size. Let me just double check. Yeah, we're good. I want you to see how much is going to come out once the RPM ramps up. We're going to go to RPM level 2, all right? And I'm going to dump some beans in. You don't need to hot start, though you can. It will be faster if you do, but whatever. I'm gonna dump some beans in. All right, so now watch. It'll start at the RPM I set it at, then it's gonna ramp up, and I want you to watch how the beans fall. Okay. It's still going. It's still going, even though it's not grinding anymore. Look. You see how much came out when it sped up? Now watch. Whoops. You see that? That huge clump? Let's just go again to full speed, see if we can get any more out. Just particles. But that's the thing. That was a big dose. I mean, that was a very big dose. But that's what I'm talking about is it holds a lot of it up there. And even when it sounds like it's done grinding, there's still a lot that comes out, which makes me think there's no way all of that coffee is in the chute. It's probably still being ground. You're not hearing any noises because it's already powdery. One of the big things is I think my EK is not experiencing that regrinding that potentially this is giving me. And I think that explains the vast taste differences I'm experiencing between this and the EK43 with my tightest alignment and the same burr set. So the brew burrs in this produced okay cups. The brew burrs in my EK43 are like the cleanest cups I've ever experienced ever. I prefer the ULF burrs in my EG1 because the clarity out of here honestly ruins a lot of coffees because any tiny roast defect is blazing in your face, but I do really enjoy them. On here, it was giving me subpar coffees to the ULFs on the Weber workshops. So I do think there's some regrinding going on. I get higher clarity with the HUs when I place it in my EK43 than I do here. So I think there's something going on there. Again, that speculation. That's just what I assume because I'm looking at how much coffee still comes out at the end. Okay, so we have this again on the 2 RPM. I'm gonna dump the beans in on a hot start. I'm gonna catch as much as I can right here. And then when it changes, I'm gonna try to like quickly switch. I've zeroed the scale out to this and we'll see how much comes out in that. So I'm gonna hot start it. Here we go. Beans are done. Didn't hear anything else. All right. Oh, there was more coming out at the end. Oh, look at all that. Let me go ahead and look at that. More coming out. Okay. So what we have on the scale right now is 15 grams. So 15 grams came up. At the end, it was pretty much done. I pulled it as quickly as I could, but that means there's like 5 grams left. I don't know why I put on the scale. We already know 20 minus 15 is 5. I'm thinking might have been reground because I just can't imagine 5 grams being caught in between the burr and the wall and in the chute. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. I found a lot of the audience of these are those who are really into coffee and might have a few of these 98 millimeter grinders. I'd encourage you if you can to do a little side by side. If you have a group of people, especially you San Francisco peeps, shout out to you all. You know who you are. Do a side by side with something that's hyperlined with an auger, maybe a Titus or something like the EK43 if you have an aligned one. We're gonna yeet it all the way up to 9. You're gonna see when you put in some hard stones like this right here, even right off Burr chirp. Let's find Burr chirp. There's Burr chirp, right off Burr chirp. We're gonna just yeet some in there. Also, I want to show you their dose cup. It's like a little condiment ketchup holder thingy. I know a lot of people complain about it. I don't really mind it. It fits like 20, 25 grams of coffee. Beans don't get really stuck in it because of the material, and it won't like ding your machine up if you bump into it like doing that. All good. We'll do that. That's only 11 grams. We need more! I got more rocks right here. 19.92. I hope that's good enough for you guys. So watch how fast this bad boy can grind. We're gonna hot start it. You ready? Timer, Ugo, when you edit, start it now. Look at that. But still coming out. Gotta give it a couple clicks. So it grinds fast, but you do have to, you know. Oh, some more was coming out. Oh, a little bit more is coming out. Oh, more is coming out. Okay, so it's fast on the crushing, but I'm telling you, I think grounds get caught in there. Maybe it's not as inefficient of an escape as you would think, but wow, does it chew through. We have a lot of chaff that's been collected up here. That'll give you, a little hoover or something. I don't know what that noise was, but something that goes like that will be great for that. But that's Clump City because how fine we were. You'll definitely need to WDT that. But anyway, so more than sufficient power, chews through beans like no one's business, and it does a fair job at it. At 26.50, that is actually a very fair price in my opinion for a 98 millimeter grinder that's built to the specs this is. But again, I do think there are some downfalls that a lot of people who bought this saved up a lot of money and bought this that maybe they're not wanting to kind of admit, or they're just okay with, yeah, I'll tape it down. Yeah, I'll just put extra stickers on there so I don't have to look over it because it's not tilted. I can't see the full dial. And I just want to say right here, right now, You are validated in your purchase. Do not get upset with me because I'm pointing out things that I don't necessarily like or I would not expect to have on this expensive of a grinder. That all being said, when you take a look at the P64, which is $1,700, and this is $2,650, I'm saying there's no point in the 64, just save it for this. Or, and I'm not paid to say that, the Zerno has that pre-breaker auger, it has variable speed on it, and so you're actually, even though yes, it's a 64 millimeter grinder, it actually acts as a bigger surface area because you're not grinding the whole bean with the burr, you're grinding up shards of the bean. This grinds the whole bean. So I can't tell you mathematically what that 64 is actually acting like when compared to something like this, but what I can say is cup to cup, it is a very close call as to which produces better coffees. The HU burrs in this do a really nice job. They create decent filter coffees and they create really nice espresso. Again, I preferred it when I put the HUs in my EK43, but it is what it is. The pre-2015 EK43s are great in here. I did not like the ULFs in here. The brew burrs in this are okay as well. I think it's your best option for filter. So if you're wanting filter, the brew burrs, if you're wanting espresso, HU are kind of the two best options with this and the most popular with you all. For those of you that just want to get this, because it does what it should do, it grinds the coffee and it spits it out, gives you a nice workflow, then this is a good option. And at $2,650, that's not killing the bank when you consider, please hear those words, the competitors like the Coffetex and the EG1s and the Tituses of the world that are more expensive. $2,650 is palatable. Now, I'm not sure what the price is elsewhere. It might be more expensive. The import tax might kill you. I'm not sure. But what I can say is at $2,650, I think this is a solid purchase. Personally, if you give me a $2,650 budget, and that's like the budget, so it comes with a set of burrs, you get stuck with that one set of burrs because that's like as much as you're saving. I'm personally buying the Zerno, and I'm getting like 2 extra sets of burrs. Easy to change the burrs, and it maintains alignment really well. And I can't tell you enough how nice the coffees are that come out of it. It's way different than any other 64 millimeter grinder on the market because of how it is built with that pre-breaking auger mechanism. I know a lot of people just want one burr set. They don't want to switch it. They want to set it, forget it, good to go. $2,650 is your height. This does a good job. And those of you that have it, I'm sure you're very happy with it because the workflow is really nice. If you do RDT the beans, sometimes, somehow, mine will get caught on the anti-popcorn device inside the lid itself because of the water on the beans. And that can get a little annoying to put your finger in there, which I don't recommend doing. I mean, you're not anywhere close to the burrs, but you know, you probably shouldn't. But I've lost a finger, so it's all good. I do think this is great. Is it worth the hype where people are like, this is the #1 grinder? I don't believe so. I think people like it because the workflow, the footprint, the fact that it never stalls, that it gets the job done. Because a lot of people, even though I prefer the EG1 to this, it is $1,500 more expensive. It does stall very occasionally. I've only had it happen to me like 3 times, but people online want to believe it happens every day. But this will never have that issue. They are constantly changing things. I appreciate they sent me this as like as a beta tester, and again, I do think it's nice. It feels a lot better. I enjoy the feeling of dialing. I just don't like having to look over the grinder in order to see where I'm at, and I don't want to have to use multiple stickers. That's kind of like no fun for me. The ground's getting caught in the chute, and you have to ramp up the RPM, or you've got to Espresso is great. It does a very good job. It's going to do better than most every stock grinder out there because it is decently aligned out of the box. You can always do better. It is decently aligned. I wouldn't recommend trying to align it if you have one of the stuck burr things because that would be a nightmare. The filter with these stock burrs does a solid, adequate job. I think that, honestly, out of the Zerno, when you put in the HU burrs, it's almost the same. And I think, I'm not saying you can put the 64 millimeter HUs in the P64 or any other grinder that has a different eating mechanism because the Zerno just is not a 64 millimeter grinder when you think about it. I do think that it has a similar filter to that. So it's like an elevated HU, 64 HU cup. It's not to where MP is, the multi-purpose at 64. It's kind of in between the two. 64 millimeter cast is maybe a better explanation of what filter tastes out of this, but the 64 cast I still think are a little better, even in something like a DF64 than the filter on this. If you are a filter first person, you get this, you're gonna wanna install the brew burrs, not the ULFs. Maybe you can try them if you like them, that's fine. I just did not get any brews I enjoyed out of it. And honestly, when I brewed for Ugo, he would always complain about those brews as well. He just didn't know what burrs they were being used. The motor, robust as mess. Their customer service is hands down the best I've experienced from any grinder company when it comes to like these expensive up-end grinders. Anyway, if you would take a moment and hit this like and subscribe, that would mean mean a whole lot for this channel. I put a lot of effort into this, and a lot of you don't know, but this is not my job. I don't make my income for my family and everything else off this. I funnel all back into the channel and goes to Ugo and all that good stuff for the videography and editing and the equipment. I buy as much as I can. I bought my EK, I bought my P100, I bought my EG1, and that's a lot of expensive stuff. And I still work full-time outside of this. So it helps me a lot when you hit that subscribe, when you hit the like, helps boost the algorithm, helps with potential, just the potential in the future. I am a weird coffee person. Shout out to Daddy Hoff for this shirt. He sent it my way. He probably just wanted free marketing. Ugh, that British bloke. Just kidding. I asked for it. And that's everything for today. I hope that you brew something tasty today. And cheers.